there's a pretty interesting Diary of a CEO podcast episode where Gary Stevenson and Daniel Priestly are discussing basically the wealth inequality and the current global market. Who is Gary Stevenson? He runs a YouTube channel called Gary's Economics. He was apparently one of the top Citibank traders back in 2010, 11, where he made most of his money, enough to retire and don't care about anything anymore. Recently he wrote a book about his story. Seems to be pretty interesting. I'm gonna give it a read. It's already en route to me. And Daniel is an entrepreneur. He made a bunch of companies in Australia, Singapore, in the UK. Currently, he seems to be running one of the things he's running. He's advocating for personal brand and wealth creation through entrepreneurship. So basically, they are talking about the economies, whether they are recovering, whether they are good or bad. Is financial apocalypse coming? And this topic is pretty interesting in the sense that I've never given it that deep thought. And although I agree with some things from Gary, some things from Steven, from Daniel, from Steven as well. He is the host of the podcast. But it made me think, so I believe it's worth watching. So let's watch a couple of clips from it.
At the beginning of COVID, we knew the government was going to give an enormous amount of money out. Total amount of money now, UK government deficit since the beginning of COVID is £1 trillion. US number is $14 trillion. That's £20,000 per UK adult. My background is I understand that when the distribution gets worse, when inequality gets worse, living standards fall. So when the UK government was going to give £1 trillion out, all I wanted to know was who's going to end up with that money. That's all I wanted to know. And the US number, 13 trillion, 14 trillion, is just outlandish. But I think the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my whole life was that at the beginning of COVID, the very beginning of COVID, we knew governments across the world were going to be giving out tens of trillions of pounds, dollars, euros. Nobody even thought to ask who's going to get tens of trillions richer. Nobody in the Conservatives, nobody in Labour.
Yeah, so I actually, thinking back, I've never given it any thought, and I back during COVID, there was lockdown, we had to work from home, and I've never given it any. This was my personal perspective, right? I didn't really care about the markets. I didn't really care about the global POV. So I've never even thought that, okay, this is COVID, or the countries are going to start printing money and so on. Even though it affects me, I've never really thought about it until now, and it's a few years later, right? Which is a pretty mind-boggling thing, because it's kind of obvious, right? When the crisis arises, countries are going to start printing money, and even though it's obvious, me personally, I haven't even thought about it. And the question is pretty sound, right? Where does the money go from all the printing? So Gary, later advocates, which is what happened. Well, that the money always ends up in the hands of the ultra rich, and it is true. Meaning the distribution of wealth in the US quarterly. Okay, so as you can see that this is the top 1% is the darkest color. The bottom 50%, just this alone, the bottom 50% is such a small margin, right? Paper thin. It shrinks to here it's paper thin, and it recovered slightly. But as you can see, the top 1%, around COVID, right? It's always been steadily growing, the amount of wealth. It starts at 70, let's call it 78% or something, and it ends up around 75%. So it's always slightly growing. And Gary's idea is that, like, an arching idea. He's advocating that because the money always goes from the poor to the rich, the rich are squeezing the poor class, the middle class, the most poor people out, and they always end up with the money. And the money will start snowballing so hard that basically there will be an ultra big, ultra wide gap in inequality, and the rich will own everything, and the ultra poor will have no basic necessities met. And this is when I started thinking about this. I think that's fairly true, right? There is only so much you can do with your money. You can start owning so many companies. So you need to buy stuff, and there is basically me or you or anybody. When we are competing to buy the same flat, the same house, the same piece of land against the ultra rich, it's pretty hard, right? The ultra rich can afford any price. I know it's like very 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 simplified way of discussing things, but in general, if I want to buy something, I need to work hard, I need to save up, I need to yada yada, and then I might finally be able to have a down payment for a house, for a flat, for whatever. I borrow some money from the bank and then I buy it. On the other hand, the ultra rich can just buy, let's say, a building block, or a building full of apartments, right? Like gobble it up at once. And Gary's idea, which I think is probably going to happen, or some semblance of it, is that they will, after I don't know how many years, but after 10, 20, 30, 40, I don't know how many years, they will they will buy everything, in the sense that they will buy all the flats, all the lands, all the everything, and we will just be renting all the wealth, all the houses, all the flats, because the wealth snowballs out of control, right? Me or you or anybody, we earn a few percentage points every year, probably on our wealth, small percentage points. So now imagine if instead of a small savings account, you have millions and millions of dollars, euros, whatever. Even the interest itself, the compound interest itself, will be so high that the ultra rich will just have nothing better to do with the money than to keep buying, which is a scary thought, to be honest. If ultra rich own everything, do they own us? I mean, yeah.
But we exist in
let's listen to Gary a bit more.
Economy where wealth is being extracted out of the middle class, out of the working class, very, very rapidly. It's benefiting people like the three of us at this table. It will benefit our kids. You know, our kids will be rich, their kids will be poor. And I just think we should be honest with them. Capitalism's finished. We won. Well done, Stephen. Well done, Daniel. Well done, Gary. It's over now. Our kids will be rich, their kids will be poor. They'll pay the taxes. We won't pay the taxes. We'll avoid it. I'll make money betting on it year after year. Why are we lying to them? Why are we lying to them?
Yeah, I think that's an overly simplified view of things.
It's an overly simplified view of things that has made me a multimillionaire.
Yeah, well, look, entrepreneurs take bets on the economy.
Yeah, Gary, freaking Gary. I'd love to be a multi-millionaire or a millionaire at some point. But yeah, as you can see, the graphs it's like slowly squeezing out the top 1% is slowly squeezing out everybody else. I mean, the 90th to 99 percentile slightly came back up, but everybody else seems to be doing badly, aside from the top 1%, which is not good. I am no economist myself, but as far as I understand, for a healthy economy in any given country, you need as wide of a middle class as possible. Meaning, you don't want the wealth gap to be enormous, and you don't want the most poor class to be the biggest, right? Because if there is the most amount of poor people in your country, they'll probably riot, there will probably be crime. So you want the middle class to be as wide, to be in the middle class to be as many people as possible. So everybody can afford the necessities and even housing and stuff. However, they are not discontent with their situation.
5%.
Disabled benefits. What do you want to cut?
Hold up. All I know is in Switzerland,
I'll tell you what I want to do.
The government is
cut
25%.
the taxes on those entrepreneurs and raise the taxes on the billionaires.
Yeah.
Because I worked my tits off.
How many billionaires are in the UK?
There's a lot of billionaires in the UK.
It's 100.
So Gary's idea is to cut the taxes on the working class and entrepreneurs. Working class, obviously, because working class is the poorest. Entrepreneurs, because they are the wealth creators. And he wants to tax millionaires and billionaires. I think that the cap he mentioned, the let's say the cap of wealth where you're not extra taxed. Gary said, I believe it's like 10 million pounds or 10 million USD. Above that, there should be some extra taxes. So although on paper this idea is seems sound, right? So hey, they have so much money, they can afford the extra taxes. But like, who's stopping the people to move their business elsewhere, right? So unfortunately, this is a business. I would imagine is a very brutal game, right? And another same somewhat honest in the sense that I don't want to. Well, let's pretend I'm an entrepreneur. I don't want to give or to pay taxes, or I want to pay as little tax as possible. Why? Because I care about my own self-interest. So now the country I am currently in is raising the taxes on me. Is there a way I can spend right now some amount of money that will in the long run benefit me due to lower taxes, right? Meaning I don't want to give my money through taxes over time. I will spend some money to move my business elsewhere and pay no taxes. So it's like, it's simple math, right? I believe Gary should know that, right? And I think they discussed it at some point, at least briefly. So although his theory of like taxing the omega rich are makes sense, but on paper it's probably not gonna happen.
On a condition.
Yeah, why are the millionaires?
You yourself said.
No, you're 100%
The reason
right.
why
Yeah.
they left is because we let them live here
taxes-
on the condition that they didn't have to pay taxes.
On their global, taxes matter.
They are discussing why the millionaires are leaving the UK, and I don't know the UK law that well, or almost at all, to be honest. But I think the idea is that they started taxing the millionaires in the UK, and then they were like, F it, we moved to Dubai.
Matter, right? So why are it?
Because although they were residents of UK, they didn't have to pay taxes on their assets, wealth, companies outside of the UK.
Why is everyone going to Dubai? Dubai, they're going there because there's no tax.
These guys, they live in Dubai. Their money comes from the West. They are making money from the West, while your average Western ordinary person watching this show now cannot afford to buy a house, cannot afford to have a family, we can tax those revenues at the point of sale. Why do we allow these guys?
It's called a consumption tax.
No, it's not. It's a tax on profits. It's not a tax on consumption.
You just said at point of sale, which means it's a consumption
tax. Based on the profits. You look at how much profit they have,
that's not
and then
you
work out where the profits go. Exactly, it's not a consumption tax, like I'm saying.
So if you tax profits, right, then those profits have to accumulate in that country. And because of the digital ecosystem that we now have, the world we now live in, I can lease the database off of my company in Luxembourg. I can license license my logo from a company. I
understand how profit shifting works.
Go on.
Okay, so listen, these guys are not Gandalf.
So basically the idea of profit shifting is that, also I am no expert at this myself. However, it seems that when you have a company in one place, you can make it so the profits are generated or like appear to be in the other place where taxes are lower, right? By leasing the logos or the database or something. So you can like make it appear that profits are made elsewhere than they are actually made.
You just say, we don't accept profit shifting. We don't need to accept profit shifting. China does not accept profit shifting. We did not accept profit shifting 50 years ago. We do not have to accept profit shifting. But you have a government class who are extremely wealthy and a media class who are extremely wealthy saying it's impossible to tax rich people. And I would like to say, I will agree 100%. It is difficult to tax rich people.
Yeah.
It is very, very, very difficult to tax rich people. I don't come here saying I want to tax rich people because it's easy. I know it's hard. I know probably I'm going to lose. I know our viewers, kids, will live in desperate poverty. I know that. I do this because...
Gary. So I actually am not familiar with specific situation in the UK. I knew there were like riots somewhat recently, and the situation is much worse than it was. Not sure if I remember correctly, but apparently UK was considering rejoining the European Union at some point, maybe to help the situation. And I think, well, US, as far as I know, that in some cities there is a lot of homeless people, there is a lot of poverty. It's somewhat similar in that sense in the UK. That's why Gary is like so. I think that's why Gary is, I guess, so hung up on this idea that okay, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing you'll be able to do during your lifetime, and if you didn't, if you were not born with a rich daddy or mommy, you're screwed, right? That's Gary.
Housing being shit, and we can both agree on that.
Yeah.
But do you think there are new opportunities that didn't exist for our parents or grandparents, but they do exist for people today?
I think the reality is, for kids from poor backgrounds, it is almost impossible to realistically get even financial security, never mind wealth.
But why do you think you could do it, I could do it, he could do it, but you don't think other people could do it?
Well, the first thing is I'm 38 now, so I'm not a kid nowadays. Listen, I won every maths competition I've ever been in, you know what I mean, since I was a little kid. I didn't even have a desk in my house, you know. I was one of the top students at LSE, and I still had to win my job by cheating in the card game. You know, that's the world that we live in. I don't think that's a very replicable strategy. And look, it's very easy for people like us who've made money to say, oh, we did it, aren't we great? Go out and, you know, you've said that you think if young people go and work in a tech business, they can get financial security. If it was that easy, they'd all be doing it. You know, they're not idiots. Our viewers are not idiots. They're trying. They want to find the good opportunities, and they work. Listen, they're working so hard.
I'm not the one saying they're idiots. You're the one who says that they can't do it anymore. I see people do it all the time. Like, I'm working in entrepreneur.
People from poor backgrounds. But then why are our viewers? You think all of our? If it was that easy, why is everybody not doing it?
I'll tell you why people aren't doing it. We went through a schooling system that taught us how to get an office job.
Okay.
Right. We went through a schooling system to prepare us for a world that doesn't really exist anymore, which is the Industrial Revolution world. And you have to go through a process of figuring out how it really works. Okay. So what I see is most often the people who do really well financially who are young, they dropped out of school, they dropped out of university, they started learning how to do things by doing their own research. They start their own business or co-found a business. They take a very alternative path. None of that was taught to us at school. None of it's taught to us in normal society. We have a school system that manufactures people for a set of skills that are not particularly valuable anymore. Yeah. And we also get them in debt for those skills. When people sidestep that and say, okay, I'm not going to get into university debt, I'm just going to go off and actually figure out how the world works, there's actually loads of opportunities.
Okay.
So I totally agree with Dan here. The idea, or rather, the education system, at least where I live, so I come from Poland, and I think it's not even the education system. It's like both education system and the previous generation. That's somewhat they are unable to catch up with what's happening. I am not saying I can catch up, but I think the education system and the previous generations, I mean parents, let's say, for example, my parents, they are unable to catch up to how fast the world is changing due to technology. And the outcome of that is, as Dan pretty eloquently said, the education system teaches people that in order to be financially stable, you need to go to school, go to university. After you graduate, you find a company, and you work in that company. And then, I guess, family, house, 3 kids, whatever. And that was the case, let's say, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 25 and back, I would imagine. For the most part, that was the case. But the world progressed so quickly that most of the people didn't catch up, and the education system didn't change at all, at least in Poland, and as far as I know. So we still almost indoctrinate people that we have to go through school. Like the other bad thing about going through school is like we are not rewarding creativity and pushing the envelope, pushing the limits. We kind of box people in the sense that the best student is like brought down to the level of the average student, and the worst student is brought up. This is good, right? Bringing the lowest student back to the level of the average one. But the best people are somewhat capped, and instead of rewarding that, let's say, the brilliance and like some talents in certain areas, I don't want to say it like that. It sounds bad, but we're almost like cloning people, right? And hey, go work your corporate job. Go be a nice little citizen. Pay your taxes. And yeah, so it's like the creativity is not rewarded, which is not good. And we are learning some of the stuff we are learning is pretty outdated. With YouTube around, with like all the course websites that you can on YouTube, at least you have everything for free. You can learn so much. And the skills you learn are a lot of the times much more applicable, right? One can give the argument that right now because we are in the informational era, there is too much information, so there is another problem that you cannot distinguish the good from the bad. Let's say voting systems on websites like thumbs up, thumbs down, or however many stars you give a course, that helps, but obviously it's not perfect, right? So you can give the argument that there's too much information as well. But I agree with Dan here. That we should start thinking slightly differently than what we were taught in school. Unless we want a dead-end corporate job. Well, dead end. So I'm not saying that a corporate job is bad. I am saying that some people are satisfied with a very safe and secure corporate job. The problem is with, or not even corporate job, you can sell stuff in a grocery store. That's fine as well. Some people are satisfied with it. That's totally fine. And to Gary's point, a lot of the time that type of job doesn't pay very well. So you struggle with basic necessities, buying a house, this sort of stuff. So they are kind of both explaining the slightly different ends of the spectrum, and both right in that sense. But yeah, I totally agree with Dan here.
My sister, she's a poet, and she wrote a really successful grime and musical about Dizzy Rascal's first album, all right? She comes from obviously the same family as me, poor family. She works so hard. She works so hard. 2 degrees. She can barely pay the rent, all right? So I don't want to turn around to our young kids and say, well, I've got this talent, follow your talent. Because it doesn't work, Stephen.
True.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Wait, my sister does great work, but financially, for young people, following your passion, following your talent, unless you come from a rich family, realistically, very, very rarely works. And I know it worked for the 3 of us at this table, but let's not pretend that everyone experiences the same things that we experienced.
What would you say to that, Dan, and what's your answer?
I think there's 2 economies going on at the moment. There's a dying economy, which is the Industrial Revolution economy, and that is all the office jobs and the factory jobs and all of that sort of stuff, which is very much being automated away and moved to globally. And at the same time, there's this new bubbling up digital economy, which I'd call the entrepreneur economy or the digital economy. Both of these economies are kind of coexisting. One's going like that, one's going like that. And if you want to be economically successful, you need to stand next to the biggest piles of money that you can. Unfortunately, being a poet doesn't pay a lot of money, and we all know that. That's not a surprise. If you came from a very rich family and you were a poet, you'd probably be one of the 60% who fell out of a rich family as well. If you want to be economically successful, you need to say, what is the thing that's economically booming right now? Gary saw the finance industry at that particular time, but if we actually look at the finance industry now, it's in decline, and trading is being replaced by AI robots. People who worked in your career are going to be replaced by IT systems that basically do similar jobs. It's going to be, these things happen. We're going through a massive technological change. But at the same time, it's never been easier to learn skills for free on YouTube. It's never been easier to join communities where you can get mentoring and get support. There are communities of angel investors who do invest in startups. It's never been cheaper or easier to start a company. There's never been more software and technology to scale and grow. In a short space of time, I would say do what Gary's done. Gary publishes online. He's built a personal brand. He's attached it to a recurring revenue model. He's got.
Yeah, I also worked for free for 4 years. So I'm not sure how replicable that is.
So build a personal brand, attach it to a business model that is where money's flowing. These are positive things you can do. We all have to play the cards we're dealt. You can always find someone who's done better with better cards, or someone who's been dealt better cards, and you can always find someone who's been dealt worse cards. No matter who you are on the planet, there's someone better, there's someone worse. You have to play the cards that you're dealt. You
Totally agree with Dan here. A lot of people are just playing the victim cards, which is never the good option, right? So when you say, okay, I'm screwed, no, there's nothing I can do, I hope maybe my government will save me, never a good approach. You always need to take matters into your own hands. And as Dan said, there's always someone worse, there is always someone better. There's no point in comparing this or that or the other. Everybody's born with some set of skills that they can use to make money. Like Dan said, we live in an era that's the most accessible when it comes to technology, knowledge, skills, and so on. We just haven't bridged the gap of like what's the old education system taught us and what the world actually is. So if we bridge that gap, we should do just fine. And yeah, I was looking. The previous chart was wealth distribution in the US. I was looking at the wealth distribution in Europe. The European Central Bank posted this, And yeah, I just want to go back to this graph as a finishing touch. So the same thing happens in US and Europe, and I imagine across the board, where the wealthiest people are generating wealth at the levels we've never seen before. It's snowballing out of control. It's squeezing out the middle class and the poorest. Not sure if it's possible what Gary's suggesting to tax the rich. They'll just bail to another country. Not sure what actually can be done right now. I'm no politician myself, no economist. However, this was somewhat like this conversation between Dan and Gary was somewhat eye-opening. I don't agree fully with both of them. That what can be done to tax the rich or to lessen the taxes on the poor. Maybe both, maybe some combination. I don't know. However, what you can take from this debate is what Dan said. Everything right now is very accessible. Some LLMs are free and they can help you build even like the most basic software. Although they hallucinate a bit, so be careful, obviously. There is a lot of skills to be learned on YouTube. You just need to know where and how to look. And you can learn, you can build something out of yourself, and anybody can. So to make your situation stable, just take matters into your own hands. Don't play the victim card. Just, as Dan said, play the hand that you are dealt, and you'll do just fine. Thanks for watching.